gentlemen, I'm Joe, he's Nick, and you are entering into the combat zone, where the only thing the enemy has to say is, bail out, take cover, abandon ship, and we surrender.
Hey, right on.
I didn't even need cue cards for that tonight, Nick.
That's true. I was tempted to write one up, but no, I know Joseph will get this right. I'm not worried about it.
It's only taken 40 episodes.
That's right.
Can you believe this is our 40th episode?
Well, it's appropriate then that this is the last one for the year. Like, this is it for 2018. We'll be back on the 2nd of January, which is a Wednesday. Looking forward to the new year.
Right. So next week's show is Boxing Day. And we've that's when it's scheduled for. At least.
But we're not.
But we're not going to do it. We're going to give you guys a break. We're going to take a bit of a break.
Yeah,
Christmas
that's right.
vacation.
Well, I was going to ask. Well, I know that at my place there will be lots of food, there will be relatives, and there'll be lots of garbage to take out and wrapping and all that stuff. I don't know what your traditions around the Jewish faith, but I know in our circles, Christmas Day, the way we used to do it when I was a kid was we'd go to midnight mass, we'd come home, and then we would open all our presents. And then during the day, we would go we'd all go to bed, or mom and dad would go back to bed, and we'd just spend hours playing with their new toys. And then on Christmas Day, we'd go to my grandmother's place for a huge meal. And there was this mountain, because she had 5 kids, and they all had a whole bunch of kids. So when I was about 8 to 14 or 15 or so, during that time period, there was this, in her basement, in my grandmother's basement, there was this little tree and a mountain of toys or gifts wrapped up. And somebody would say, 3, 2, 1, go. And everybody would just squeal with delight, and the paper would go flying, and it would be all over in 15 minutes.
It sounds exciting.
It was. That's not how we do it now.
Our Christmas tradition is nothing.
Well, that's why.
It's a downtime. Now, it's funny because my wife and I, for a few years, what we decided to do is when, the kids were off doing whatever they were doing, so we decided that we would drive to Toronto or whatever to spend Christmas in a hotel. Because at the time, we didn't actually have a TV of any kind.
Right.
So forget about hooked up to cable or
right.
anything like that. And, of course, Netflix we're talking
didn't
already
exist.
20 some odd years ago.
Right.
So Netflix and all of these groups weren't available. I said groups. I don't mean groups. Programs, whatever you want to call them, right?
Right.
Videos. You back at that time, you still had to go out and rent a video, like and put it into your VCR.
Please be kind and rewind.
Right, something like that. That was something when you rented them, sure. So what we would do is we would go to Toronto and we did this from time to time anyway, just spend overnight in a hotel room because we'd get to watch TV because we didn't have a TV at home, right? Where was I going with this? The problem was that we figured, okay, well, we'd go out to all of these kosher restaurants, etc., only to discover, Nick, that the kosher restaurants were all closed on Christmas. so everything was closed at Christmas. It wasn't just that there was no shopping. There was no shopping and there was nowhere to eat. So, so we did that a couple of years, maybe 3 years, and then we said, that this is stupid. Why aren't we just staying at home and just enjoying the time at home? Yeah. So that's what we did. And eventually we got a TV. The kids grew up and they were all out, and we got ourselves a television. And but now we have a television. We have one of the smart TVs.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not hooked up to cable or anything like that. We just have Netflix and we have Amazon Video. That's it. And, of course, we have access to the internet, so we can get YouTube or we can get some of the sports streaming channels if we want.
So,
but we can't. But we don't have regular TV.
No, we don't do that either. But at our place now, the way that Christmas works is, and I find it. I mean, Christmas for us is a huge deal, and when we have all the kids home. My wife has a different tradition because there was only her and her brother. She grew up with just, my in-laws only had 2 kids, and I married 50% of them. Anyway, they would each get a gift, and everybody would sit and watch that person open the gift, and all clap and cheer, yay, yay, yay. Well, that's fine, but when there's 8 kids and they all want to have their present right now, and we had to sit and wait. it was tough. So I wonder how long that will last now the grandkids are here. So we'll see. Anyway.
How many grandchildren do you have, Nick?
We have 2 now, 1 on the way.
Okay.
We have, they know it's going to be a little boy, and they have...
Oh, don't spoil it. Now you've spoiled it for all of us,
They told
Nick.
me.
But it's spoiled for me.
Now the question is,
the suspense is gone.
Well, no, it's a new kind of suspense. What are they going to call it?
I don't find that suspenseful at all.
Oh, well, I know around our place I do. If my sons would ever get married and have a grandson, then I know what they're supposed to call it. What they will, I don't know. Anyway, all right. You were telling me earlier, just to get into the meat of the show, you had an interesting encounter today. Now, I didn't ask you anything about this. It has to do with a gift card scam.
Yeah, it's not an encounter, but I think it's really appropriate. I ran into a problem like this recently, and I was speaking to some people about it tonight at a retail store, and I think it's appropriate for the season because, you know, one of the things that people do at this time of the year is they're buying gifts, and one of the gifts that's very convenient for people to buy is a gift card.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
you know, you could go and spend $25 on a Visa gift card or a MasterCard or anything like that, right?
Any denomination you want, really.
Or stuff that's more specific to a particular store. So
right.
you can, you know, LCBO.
Well, if you're into crafts or hobbies or things like that.
The
or
beer
liquor.
store.
Or liquor. Yeah.
Okay. But I did this once recently. I bought a gift card. I opened it up. Because I wanted to give it to somebody, but I opened it up and I took a look at it and I realized that the number had been scratched out. And so today I was talking to somebody about this and I said, you know, I noticed this happening and this must be happening at the factory. And the guys explained to me, they said, no, it's not happening at the factory. What happens is that somebody, and it's very sophisticated, and I guess it's a bit of a, I don't know how they get a hold of these cards in advance, but maybe they take them off the shelf, check this stuff out, and then bring it back and sneak it on the shelf. I don't know.
Right.
But the way it works is they make a little slit on the side of the package. They reach in and they pull the gift card out. And then they take a picture of the card, both the numbers on the front and the numbers on the back. And then they scratch the numbers out before putting the card back into the package, sealing the package as best they can, so that it's very hard to tell that the package has been tampered with.
Right.
So what happens now is you go and you pick up this gift card in the package.
Right.
You go to the cash. There's a barcode on the package.
Right.
They scan the barcode. You get charged for the gift card.
Right.
So the total, if it's a $25 gift card, you get charged $25 plus the retailer for selling the card gets to tack on a certain amount. So that might be $3, $4, $5.
Yeah, whatever it
depends
is,
on what it is. I don't know if it's a percentage.
Fee, yeah.
It's a service fee, right? You walk out the door. Okay, but here's the thing. The minute you activate the card, the minute you pay for the card, that card is now activated. You can only use the card when it's activated. In other words, you can't just steal a gift card
it's like
off
a
the
light
shelf.
switch. They have to turn it on.
They turn it on. Once it's turned on, okay, you don't have to have the card. You just have to have the numbers to use the gift card, right?
Really?
Because you can do it online. Think about that. You can use a gift card. If let's say it's a Visa or a MasterCard gift card.
Fair enough. Yeah.
You can use it online.
So they're stealing $25 from you.
So what happens is they have whatever the program is, somehow or other, they get a little notification when that card is activated. They immediately take the money off of that card. And you're left with a gift card with no money on it, but it doesn't matter because you don't have the numbers. But they have the numbers, so you can't take that card and use it. And the interesting
dirty, rotten scam.
So you've gotten scammed. And you've paid for the card, and then you can't use it. So now I have some advice on this, by the way. But anyway, go on.
I was going to say, I think that it sounds to me like what you should do is when you get to the counter, when you get to the cash register, open the card up and make sure the numbers aren't scratched.
Well, and you're anticipating what I want to say. I was going to say that. See, I forgot to turn my mic on there, Nick.
That's why I said it.
So you're anticipating what I was going to say, Nick.
Okay.
That is exactly the advice that I would give. The advice I would give is that when you purchase a gift card, make sure that that when you purchase it, you actually open the package
and examine
at least at the store where you're in.
That's right.
At least at the store, if not right at the cash.
Yeah.
Open it to make sure the card is properly intact. And if it's not, then if you've paid for it already, you go immediately to customer service and say, "This is the card I just paid for," and they'll refund you the money. But it's not an easy process. They don't just refund you the money. They have to go to the gift card supplier.
Right.
So it may take 15, 20 minutes to sort that out with the supplier.
Right.
But people should be aware of this scam going on. And the reason I bring it up is because when I was speaking to these guys at this store this evening before I came to the studio, and I'm not going to say what store it was or where it was located, because then people will be able to start to generalize where our secret studio is. So the point is that we started talking about this, and they said, yeah, it happens quite often. And then one of the guys that was listening, who happens to be working at the store, goes and he starts looking at the gift cards. And within 5 minutes, he found 5 of these gift cards that had been scratched out like this.
5?
5 of them.
Just because you happen to mention it?
That's because I happen to mention it.
Holy smoke. So this sounds like a pretty massive scam.
Well, it has to be. If you think about it, about how popular these cards are now, for sure, it's got to be widespread. So a lot of people have to be inconvenienced, okay? And this is the thing is, normally when you buy a gift card, Nick, you give it in the package. You don't open the package. I'm saying to you, whatever you do this Christmas season, if you're buying gift cards for your friends or family as a gift, do yourself a favor. Open the package and take the card out. You can always, it's a gift card. You can always just give the gift card or rewrap it, whatever, put it in an envelope, do whatever you want. But don't give a gift of a gift card without first verifying that the card has not been damaged. It's an ongoing problem, and this is an interesting subject. There are all kinds of scams going on.
And it shows you, some people can be really heartless. Let's say that you give a $25 gift. I carried in my wallet for, 4 or 5 years a gift card for Hobby Lobby. Okay, little shout out to that. It's over in the train yards, deals with all kinds of different models and RC aircraft and stuff like that. And they're a great little store.
Is that the store that had problems in the States?
Hobby Lobby?
Was it Hobby Lobby? It's a Christian-owned store. Maybe I'm thinking of a different one. Anyway, go on.
Maybe, but this is the local one here in Ottawa, and everybody, the staff is great. They're a lot of fun. These guys know their stuff. And I was in there because I'm in the middle of building an RC aircraft right now, and I had a $50 gift certificate on me, and I needed different little bits and pieces like glue and things like that to help put this model together. And I pulled that card out of my wallet. It's been in there for 5 years. Because when my family originally bought me the model, I had intended to build it, but life comes along and throws you a curve, and you don't have time to build it. Well, now I do. So I pulled it out, and I'm starting to put it together. So that card was still valid. And it's there. When you first mentioned this to me tonight about this, when you first said, I want to talk about that, I was thinking that's where you were going, was the expiry on gift cards, because there was a law passed a little while ago where they're not allowed to have an expiry date on gift cards anymore.
Right. I think I remember that. It's now that you mention it, that's true.
Yep.
A lot of gift cards used to have expiry dates.
Right.
So if you didn't spend the money within a certain amount of time,
it's just pure gravy for the store.
That's right. Whoever was issuing the gift card just got to keep that money.
That's right.
Right. And I do remember that there was talk about a law.
Yeah, as far as I know, they did pass one.
Right.
So,
it does make sense. And, I'm not a big believer in big government and that, but that's a good law. I think that's good government right there.
Now, speaking of good laws, let me ask you this, because, and this isn't on our list, this is just something I just thought of, this whole passenger Bill of Rights. Now, I know you fly a lot, and my wife just came back from Southern Ontario, where she was visiting some relatives down there, and flew on a local airline. And she said, I had to sit on the tarmac for about an hour. As they pulled away, a warning light came on in the cockpit. and they had made a decision and said, no, we're going to get this warning light under control. So they brought it back to the dock, and they sat there until technicians could come along and reboot the system, make sure there was nothing wrong. She says, you know something? I don't need anybody to compensate me for that because I want to fly in a safe airplane. I want to make sure that there's no warning lights going off before we even leave the ground. I mean, I get the reason for warning lights, but if you take off with one, and again, it's a judgment call. Like, is this just a circuit breaker that's gone bad? Is it just telling me that the cigarette ashtray, and no, they don't allow smoking anymore, is it something insignificant, or is this a serious problem? And they always tend to err on the side of caution. But what I'm curious about is if you have to wait in an airplane for more than a given amount of time, I forget the time frame, but they have to pay you, the airline has to pay you, I think the number was $940, and if you had to wait a longer period of time, then it's up to $2,400 or something along that line.
Well, I did see that there was a passenger bill of rights that was passed in the last little while, the last few days, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was. And
but
if
I'm not familiar with
in advance, I would have brought the numbers up. But
this is a good time for us to say that our number to call is toll free anywhere in North America, 844-415-2115. And if you want to chat, we welcome you in our chat room. Just click on the chat bubble or the comment bubble on the live player online. And you may have to register or log in, and that's just for us to be able to filter out all of those nasty bots.
That's right. We don't like
bots.
the
robots and that to try to hack into our system and everything. So it's just to make sure that you're human, if not humane. So the reason I say that, Nick, is because if there's anyone out there who knows the details of the new Passenger Bill of Rights,
they can call
in or send us some details by chat, and we'll be happy to pass that on to our listeners. Now, I have an interesting story. It's too bad that they didn't pass this before if there's real money involved. About a year and a half ago, I was in Winnipeg. I was not in Winnipeg, but it was in Manitoba, but I had flown to this program in Winnipeg and then drove down. And then coming back, so I'm flying from Winnipeg to Ottawa via Toronto. So I fly from Winnipeg to Toronto, and then I'm supposed to transfer planes in Toronto and then take a flight to Ottawa from Toronto. So we're flying towards Toronto, which is about a 2.5 hour thereabouts flight from Winnipeg. And about 2 hours into the flight, we start circling, and the pilot comes on and says there's a delay in Toronto because of thunderstorms, of weather. So we're doing this. There's this delay for, 15, 20 minutes. And then the pilot comes on and says, unfortunately, the weather is so bad in Toronto, and this is in September, by the way. The weather is so bad in Toronto with the thunderstorms and lightning and heavy rain that they've shut down the airport in Toronto temporarily, so we're being diverted. So where do you think they divert us to? They divert us to Ottawa. So we land in Ottawa, but it's an unscheduled landing in Ottawa, so they don't have a gate ready and waiting for us.
Right.
They just figure it's a temporary stop, so we'll just wait on the plane. Now, as it happens, I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, I'm in Ottawa, and it wasn't just me; there were other passengers. So we're saying, hey, let's get off here in Ottawa. Let us off here in Ottawa. No can do, because they can't get the facilities the truck to come and check the luggage and remove the luggage, right? So now, Nick, we were sitting on the tarmac. We landed in Ottawa around 7 o'clock. We were sitting on the tarmac till almost midnight. So almost 5 hours, thereabouts, give or take. Right. 5 hours.
That's a long time.
Now, everybody was fairly good-natured. They brought a ramp and they brought water for everybody, so everybody had water. But here's the funny thing, okay? The funny thing is that then they released the plane because the airport's now open in Toronto.
Right.
So here we are in Ottawa. It's midnight.
Flying to Toronto.
And we fly to Toronto.
To get an airplane back to Ottawa.
No, there's no longer any flights to Ottawa.
Oh, my God.
I've missed my flight back to Ottawa. So I had to get a hotel because they didn't provide hotels or anything like that.
Well, the thing...
I mean, I could have slept at the airport because I did the booking through Expedia. And generally, I don't do airline bookings through these groups. But in this case, it was very lucky because what they did was they automatically booked me on a flight from Toronto to Ottawa at 7 a.m. the next morning.
Right.
But what some passengers were doing is they were just sleeping on the floor in the terminal in Toronto. I said, you know what? I'm 56 years old. I'm
not doing this.
I'm not doing that. I've slept on my fair share of floors and ground and dirt and all that stuff. So I spent 3 hours in a hotel, got 3 hours sleep before I had to get up and be back at the airport in time to catch my flight to Ottawa. What should have been about a 5-hour total trip, and it ended up taking me almost 24 hours.
Yeah. Marin is making a couple of points here. She's saying that the pilot is pressured to land so there's no delay, or is it pressured to take off for those reasons? And that's not necessarily in the best interest of safety under this new system. And you know what? I think there's probably a lot of truth to that. The part of it that I wonder about, though, this whole Bill of Rights, is that it's already hard enough to run an airline in Canada. Now, I understand why they overbook, okay? Because a lot of times people, for whatever reason, who book a flight don't show up. And they don't buy their ticket. They don't get on the airplane. So that's revenue lost because now they don't have a passenger to go in that seat, and they don't like flying around with half-filled airplanes. I understand that, and I don't see how this makes that any easier, because what you'll ultimately do, because when a company has to lay out a fee, whether it be under this guise or any other guise, there's only one place to get that money, and that is from the customer, and that means air travel is going to become even more expensive than it already is in Canada. Like to fly from here to Winnipeg, or fly to here from Halifax, okay, or pick any Canadian destination you want, is 3 or 4 times as expensive as it is to fly an equal distance from one major U.S. city to another in the States. Now, there's a whole lot more carriers down there. There's volume down there. But I don't think they have the same kinds of regulations that we have to live with up here as the airlines. You know, instead of having an open skies policy where anybody who can put an airplane in the air safely and provide an air service is allowed to come up and compete for that business, which would bring prices down, they don't want to hear that. So this is what a lot of what I have. When I saw that, I thought, you know what, this is only going to make everything more expensive for the traveling Canadian, because people in a country this large, this time of year as an example, to fly from here to Halifax or fly from here to BC to visit with family at Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever the occasion is, a wedding, a funeral, whatever it is, you're only making it harder on them because now they have to cough up even more money to get on a plane that, for the most part, is going to get there when they say they're going to get there. It just drives me crazy.
Well, I have noticed in the last couple of years, because as you pointed out, I do travel a fair amount and I do fly a fair amount in my traveling. And I have noticed, at least in terms of delays, a significant increase from previous years. Just the last 2 years. It seems that every flight that I get on has some problem where, we're delayed, 15 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, sometimes an hour. Sometimes that's on the tarmac, away from the ramp. Sometimes it's in the plane waiting on the ramp. Sometimes it's just waiting to get on the plane.
Right.
But I haven't tracked it enough to be able to say whether or not it's just my impression. But certainly I think I've noticed, and perhaps other people have noticed the same thing, that there's a lot more delay in air travel than there has been lately, or there was previously. So I don't know if anyone else has had that experience, but certainly that's been my experience.
Yeah, and I think it's the old. not especially with air travel. Although air travel is significantly safer than any other form of travel. Like if you want to get in a car and drive across the country, your chances of running into something solid and having an accident are far greater than they are stepping onto an A300 and flying from Ottawa to BC. Okay, let's face it. Most 99% of the time, air travel is very safe. It's the most efficient way to get across the country, and I'm glad of that. I'm not suggesting we should work towards anything but improving safety and making sure the flying public is in good hands. But at the same time, you can always take things and make them so onerous and so burdensome that they begin to have the opposite or ripple effect than what you originally intended. And I think this Bill of Rights, Passenger Bill of Rights, might be a step in that direction. I don't know the details of it well enough. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but my gut instinct is this isn't helping.
Well, let me tell you one other story before we go for a break, Nick, that's related to this. And again, I'm just not entirely sure that a Bill of Rights for passengers was the right thing to do here. Let me explain to you another experience. Years ago, I flew to the Dominican Republic on a diving. A few of us were going down for a diving expedition, and we flew by Ward Air. Bought a Ward Air package that included a place to stay, airfare, and the works. You know how these packages used to work. And we flew down by Ward Air, and when we got to the place, the accommodations, there were real problems with the accommodations. The water was the big problem. We couldn't get proper water to our little shack or whatever you want to call it. I don't want to call it a chalet, but it was nice, don't get me wrong, but there was no water. And every day I'd complain that there was no water, and every day I got the same answer from my friends at the front desk of this facility. Mañana. I'd say to them, no agua, and they'd say mañana. There's practically the entire extent of my Spanish, okay? And for those who don't know, mañana means tomorrow. Don't worry, tomorrow. Anyway, they eventually moved me into another place where there was water because I complained enough. So fair enough. We get back to Canada, and I write to Ward Air. And I say, guys, I know you're not providing the accommodations, but I booked these accommodations through you, and they're giving you guys a bad name. Didn't ask for anything. 2 weeks later, I get a nice letter from Max Ward.
Right.
I don't know if it was him or just one of these automatic signatures, but he was the signatory, okay? And I'm so sorry for your bad experience. Here's a check for 50% of the total cost of what you paid for the airfare and the accommodations. And here's a travel voucher for the other 50%.
Wow.
And now, Ward Air, of course, eventually went out of business. I don't know if they were too generous on their reimbursements or whatever. But the point I'm making is, it is possible to get some service from these companies without actually having to go to the government and having the government pass a law.
And that's what
I think that's what makes me uncomfortable. When I think about a Bill of Rights, I think a Bill of Rights is something too important to trivialize it by saying we're going to give passengers quote-unquote rights. Now, we're going to codify those rights, and we're going to put together some penalties, identify what the penalties are going to be for abrogating those rights.
Yeah, that's why one of the reasons I suppose that when I first heard this story, I thought, okay, this isn't helping. This is not going to be what the traveling public is expecting, because you just can't run a business with ever increasing fees, but unable to adjust to those fees by increasing prices.
And you know what's going to happen here? What's going to happen here is that there are going to be problems that fall outside of the narrow definitions of your rights as a passenger, and the airline's just going to say, sorry, it's not in your Bill of Rights.
That's right.
And what are you going to be able to do? So that you take away the contact and the discussion. And I understand that nobody likes to have to do that, Nick, but, sometimes that's what happens. You have to do it. Anyway, there you go. We got to take our first break. Nick, we'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Back to the Combat Zone. I'm Joe. I did that on purpose. I'm Nick. He's Joe. It's Christmas. Gotta have a little fun on this show.
Oh, hey, no more whiskey for you.
Yeah.
Come on, Nick.
Anyway.
We got to do a cue card. I got to do some cue cards for you.
Yeah, you know what? It's something simple like that. And
like remembering your name?
Like remembering my name. This is what happens when you get old, see? Yeah, I carry a driver's license. Not because
you're the same age I am, Nick.
Well, okay.
So
but I carry.
Don't give me this getting old stuff.
I carry a driver's license not to show the police that I'm legally allowed to drive. It's so I remember what my address is, where I live, and I can go home.
Yeah, okay, but we're not going to tell people how you're maintaining two households, though, Nick.
Oh well, okay, we won't mention that.
Okay, one of which. No, I'm not going to say it because it's top secret. Yeah. So I'm just looking at, before we get into some other stuff here, Nick, I'm just noticing what Marin was talking about here in the chat room about credit cards and having some insurance based on your credit card. And that, Marin, that is such a great point. People get credit cards and they don't realize the services that they're getting in addition to being able to purchase with a credit card that you get with the credit card. So you should always check out what benefits you get from your credit card. For instance, my credit card, a couple of my credit cards have insurance policies, collision and liability insurance for when you rent a car. So when you go to rent a car, when I rent a car and I put it on my credit card, I never take the credit or the rental company's insurance because it's crazy insurance, crazy expensive.
Right.
$20 a day for bumper to bumper insurance with no deductible, right? And I don't know why people don't just use the insurance on their credit card because you don't pay extra for it and you get the full protection. And I've had over the years, fender benders with rental cars, and the insurance company through the credit card is super helpful. It's always been. I've never had a problem with it. And not only that, but some credit card companies, they provide travel insurance.
Yep.
Which my wife just discovered recently. For years, she was paying when we travel somewhere. She would make sure, or if I was traveling outside of the country, she'd make sure that she paid for some extra health insurance. And so finally I said, you should check out on the credit card that you're using right now to check out whether or not you have health insurance with it. Sure enough, she did. Insurance for loss of limb, okay? If you got to do an accident, some life insurance, some disability insurance, some loss of limb insurance. And finally, and this is the important one, not so much for me, Nick, but for you, bail.
Bail.
Some credit cards will actually cover bail for you if you're charged with a crime in the United States.
Well,
they absolutely will. Now that I'm making a joke when I say this is important for you, Nick, but it actually is kind of important because you can get pulled over for a moving violation, as you know, Nick, in the United States. And in some jurisdictions, if you're from Canada or from outside of the jurisdiction, they'll just write you a ticket. But there are some jurisdictions that they'll haul you off to jail until you make good whatever the fine is.
It's funny you mentioned that. I have one short little story from my years as a truck driver in the 90s. I was going through Ohio, and I had a truck. It was a 94 International, great big highway tractor, 60-inch bunk. and we'd cruise all day at 72 miles an hour. Well, Ohio made a lot of money on speeding tickets, and the truck speed limit was 55. And it feels like you're crawling at 55 miles an hour. So it was a game of cat and mouse between the truck drivers and the state police about how to get across Ohio without getting a speeding ticket. Well, turns out I got one. And for about 2 years, I behaved myself. I didn't speed. I didn't going across Ohio. But one day I was in a hurry. And sure enough, the lights came on behind me. And I went, oh, great. I ended up as a guest of the County of Toledo in their guest facility, otherwise known as the county jail, wearing the orange jumpsuit. And they would not let me go until I had arranged. I showed up in front of a video judge, like on a judge in front of a video conference, and he asked me why I hadn't paid. I said, well, it's times are tough. I got a lot of kids. And I just did not. He said, I don't believe you. Pay the fine. So I had to call my dispatcher and have him wire me the money because they were not letting me go until I got it. I spent about 6 hours in the clink. And the boss was not happy. But that's just the way it goes sometimes. So having that insurance would have been mighty handy.
I agree.
A little bit on my criminal past.
Anyway, Nick, you know what time it is? Okay, I wanted to say stupid politicians, but we really have to come up with a name. If people out there, by the way, if our listeners, if you can come up with a good name for this segment that's generic enough that we can use it, whether we're talking about bureaucrats, politicians, or just generally stupid. One of my favorite things sometimes is to read up on the stupidest, dumbest criminals of all time.
Oh my God, Lord!
Because there's some really funny stuff there.
We should just call them the Stupid Awards.
The stupid segment.
Stupid segment,
the stupid
awards,
segment.
call it, yeah. Because it's not limited. Listen, stupidity knows no political stripe, and it knows no geographical or demographic boundaries.
Okay, so this week, on this week's feature, Stupidity Award. Okay, so this is a story out of Saskatoon, where a lady by the name of Evangeline McKinnon rescued a bird that had been injured. She found it with a broken wing under a tree on Wilson Crescent in Saskatoon. And she and her partner took the bird home. They adopted it. And apparently they have a few different pets. They have a budgie. They have some cats, and they have some snakes. Personally, I don't know why anyone wants to have pet snakes, but that's okay. If that's what, turns their crank, then that's okay. Anyway, they brought this bird home. They felt that it was, if they'd left it probably correctly, the bird would have died. Anyway, so I'm just reading from the CBC online story here, Nick.
Such a reliable source.
So McKinnon, well, sometimes CBC gets it right.
Yeah, that's true.
McKinnon has since learned that she has run afoul of provincial law and has to turn the bird over to a wildlife vet to be euthanized. Now, she says that somebody reported her to Environment Saskatchewan, and 2 officers came to her house and informed her that she had to turn the bird over. And they gave her a deadline, and if she doesn't do it, she has to pay a fine. So this is a quote from Conservation Officer Kevin Harrison when he was explaining to the press what the rules are around this. Okay, so here we go. Under provincial law, the law is the captive wildlife regulations. A person needs training and, yes, you guessed it, Nick, a license.
Oh my God.
To work as an animal rehabilitator. And ravens are a species where this laws apply, Harrison said. Given where Mortimer is the name of the bird.
The raven, yeah.
Where Mortimer's wing is broken.
What else would you call a raven?
It's unlikely that the bird will ever fly again. So it's not just a question of rehabilitation, Harrison said. Quote, chances of surviving with a broken wing are not very good. of course, a little aside commentary here on my part. Even with the broken wing, the chances of this bird surviving are excellent now that it was found and it's been adopted by this family. But that's beside the point. Let's not quibble over details.
That's
Nick.
right. Let's not cloud the issue with facts.
No, we wouldn't want that. So sometimes, going back to this quote from Officer Harrison, sometimes these animals must be put down for their own good.
Yeah.
They're not going to live the quality of life that they're used to. Not flying around. Not having fun.
Sorry. That line just kills me. Not having fun. Okay, so Raven goes around going, how can we have fun today?
It's not having fun.
Obviously,
now, of course,
my life isn't worth living because I can't have fun.
I don't understand how it is that this wildlife expert or any wildlife expert can decide that the bird is not having... Personally, I think, if I was a wild bird and I was flying around outside in the weather, and it's cold at this time of the year in Saskatoon.
Especially in Saskatoon.
And even if it's in the summertime, you have to deal with the rain, got to go hunting for food. And of course, you always have that ever-present danger of becoming a victim of some other animal. I was going to say bird of prey, but I don't know, So I actually think that in terms of quality of life, I think that Mortimer the Raven is way ahead of the game. Like, let's face it, living in a controlled environment, heated home, roof over its head, 3 square meals or however meals a day, service, okay, and the company of good friends, snakes, cats, and another budgie. I think that on the fun scale, or at least Nick, on the quality of life scale, I think that Mortimer's enjoying a fantastically elevated quality of life from what he is used to. And I say he, not really knowing whether it's a he, she, or an it.
Well, you know what? The line that killed me was this having fun stuff. First of all, that means then that anyone who finds, I don't know, a squirrel, pick your wild animal. We're not talking about wolves or mountain lions or coyotes, but the small little furry things like a rabbit. If you find a rabbit in your backyard and it's been injured somehow or caught in the fence or somehow is in trouble, and somebody decides to have pity on this poor animal, takes it in, they have to have a license to do it and training, because we're so stupid we don't know how to look after. What's the difference between taking care of a rabbit and a cat? They need the same things.
Well, and going back to this quote from Officer Harrison, and I'm quoting, we can't have, because he's going to explain why this is important. We can't have people collecting these animals and going out and trying to rehabilitate them, to rehabilitate every little animal they find, because people are not trained to do it.
How much training did he have, I wonder?
Well, I'm sure he had training. It probably has like a 3-year technology certificate from their local community college.
So what he's really saying is, you're threatening my job if you do it, and I don't want to give up my $100,000 a year.
Well, you're just being cynical, Nick.
Yes, I am, but
I take it at face value. I think he really is concerned about the quality of life of this poor raven, Mortimer, and
he's going to kill it.
Weird. Well, because of course they're going to kill him. I'm not sure how you're improving the bird's quality of life by killing it.
Yeah.
But, let's not confuse our listeners, Nick. Okay? They clearly, according to Environment Saskatchewan and the bureaucrats over there, our listeners clearly do not have a sufficient training and understanding and sensitivity to the need for ravens to have fun in order to be able to comment intelligently on it.
Obviously. And who else but the government would be in a position to decide who does and who does not have the qualifications?
I don't know.
Neither do I.
Anyway, there you go. That's our stupid segment for the week.
All right.
Nick.
Yes, go ahead.
Nick, we have to do this.
I know we do. What?
We have to spend at least 5 minutes talking about smart cars.
Smart cars. I thought you said smart cards. And I'm thinking, okay, because he said we were talking about smart cars.
No, we promised last week we were.
Yes,
We
yes.
had it we had it written down that we were going to talk about smart cars last week.
Yes, we have to.
And
get
then
to,
we didn't do it. And then at the end, you promised. You said next week we're going to talk about smart
And
cars.
we have to talk about cobalt mining in the Congo too.
Oh, I totally forgot about that.
Yeah,
Okay, what do you want to talk about first? Let's do the
smart cars.
smart cars. Go for it, Nick.
Complete disaster. I can't stand the idea. You know what? When we talked about this, when I was looking over this story about the idea that, you're going to be able to use an app on your phone and have a car come to your door and how wonderful it's going to be. You won't have to worry about parking. You won't have to worry about the maintenance of a car. You know something? There's more to a car than just the sum of its parts. There's something that a car represents. It's called freedom. Like, why doesn't everybody take public transit? Because people like me like the autonomy of being able to get in a car whenever I want to, my car that I own, have paid for, and no one has the right. If I want to paint it purple with pink polka dots, there's nobody out there that can tell me I can't. Okay? And I would never do that, but unless it was a Prius, I might do it to that. But anyway, other than that, I get to choose the make, model, the performance, the trim level, all that stuff. All those are decisions that I get to make about how I'm going to carry myself around on a day-to-day basis. So if I want to get in the car at 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning and drive from here to Baie-Comeau, I can do it. I don't have to wait on a bus. Okay, I don't have to wait on public transit. I don't have to wait on an app. Because look, if you're using an app, how many people are doing it at the same time? How long is the wait? In other words,
wait a minute. What are we talking about here, Nick?
Smart cars.
But a smart car is a driverless car.
I know exactly what it is.
Well, who cares how long you have to wait? What are you talking about? It's your car. It's parked in your driveway.
No, that's not the way that I remember the story. You have an app, and they send a car to you, so you don't have to own the car. You just use it.
But can't you have your own smart car? Now, listen, you may be right.
I don't want a driverless car either.
I understand, Nick. Okay. Me, personally, I can't wait for driverless cars. But, of course, I'm going to be a nervous wreck because I am the world's worst passenger. I don't backseat drive. I don't passenger seat drive. I'm just a terrible nervous wreck as a passenger in a car. Totally.
Well, they have vehicles for you. They're called dump trucks. You get in the back, in the dump truck part, and I drive. And that way you can't see what's going on. You're not nervous about it.
I interrupted your rant about smart cars. Come on, let's go back to it.
All right. So if I have my cell phone and I need a car, and I just like Uber right now, right? The difference is Uber has a driver, and I know that I'm renting the driver's time in his vehicle. Okay, so that's a choice I can make for myself if I find that I need it for that specific purpose. But in general, I like the autonomy and the freedom that the automobile provides. There's something about our culture. Besides, in a country like Canada, you need a car. If you're going to live your whole life between, let's say, Albert and Slater, down there between Laurie, in that corridor between O'Connor and Kent, Albert, and Slater, if that's
Ottawa.
your little box.
In Ottawa.
In Ottawa.
Right.
That's right. If that's your little box that you live in, okay, you don't need a car.
Right.
But there's millions of Canadians who don't live there, who live in little tiny communities like I do, with 700 people when both dogs are home. Okay, you need a car to go to the dump. I need a pickup truck. Why? Because we don't have garbage pickup. I have to take my garbage to the dump and then pay $2 a bag to get rid of it. Don't get me started on that. Or if I want to go to, like my wife just did, we could have taken a car, but the time of weather and all that stuff indicated flying would be better. But we had the option. Car ownership. First of all, it's not only autonomy, it's a rite of passage. Like my son just bought a car for himself. He's 22, 23, and he just bought his own first car. And it's a beautiful little red Accord, Honda Accord 2-door with a 6-speed. I'm green with envy. I love the car. And I honestly try not to bug him too much to let his old man drive it. But it gives him a certain freedom so he can come and go as he chooses. He doesn't have to wait on somebody else's schedule, which is really at the heart of this. And that's why I don't like autonomous, pilotless cars, like where you don't drive. I just don't want them. It's like electric cars. I don't want them. I have no interest in them. And I don't want to be forced into one just because some sociocrat somewhere decides that me owning my own car is something that should be put an end to.
Well, you can own an electric car and drive it around just like a regular, but you don't have to have one. Yeah. And you're right. There's no reason the government should be saying you have to have one, and certainly there's no reason why the government should be subsidizing people purchasing electric cars or hybrids. But I don't have a problem with electric cars. I haven't driven one, but I when I was in Washington about a year ago, I took a couple of taxis around, and all of a sudden I realized that the taxis were electric cars. And I had not realized it until I started to think, this doesn't sound quite like a regular car.
Right.
So I asked, and yeah, sure enough, it's an electric car. It was okay. I don't have a problem with electric cars.
As long as your neighbor doesn't have to subsidize you owning it. Like, let's go back to
you're absolutely right. There's absolutely no reason why government should be subsidizing the purchase of the development or purchase of any of these cars.
But if you take those subsidies away, how much of a market is there for them in the first place?
Well, if there's no market for them, then there's no market for them. Yeah. I don't have an objection to no electric cars because there's no market for them. But if there's a market for them, why not build them?
It's the same thing as if somebody wants to put up solar panels in a wind turbine on their property to power their own particular home and that kind. I don't have any problem with that. The only problem I have is when I'm coerced into funding it through high levels of taxation and subsidies for massive companies to come in and put them up en masse. I have a problem with that. If somebody wants to go out there and there's a market for off-grid living or whatever you want to call it, knock yourself out. I don't care. Just don't expect me to pay for it.
Okay, so while we're on this subject, Nick, I just need to sneak this in, okay?
Go ahead.
For all of you people out there that want to save the environment, okay, in the wintertime, you don't want to drive, you don't want to take the bus, you don't want to stay home, you want to ride your bike, get off of it. Piss off. Stop riding your bike down the road in the middle of a snowstorm. Really, guys, I cannot think of a more stupid, dangerous thing than that. And it's dangerous for the bike riders. And at this stage, at the risk of sounding unsympathetic and not full of compassion and caring for my fellow human being, okay, if you get run over in the middle of the wintertime because you're riding your bike in this country, in this winter, in the winters we have, man, you've been asking for it. I hate to say you deserve it, but okay, maybe I won't say you deserve it, but I will say this in advance. I told you so. I mean, really, guys, stop with the nonsense of riding your bike down the road on the snow. It's crazy. You can't control your bike that way, and you're taking your life in your hands more than anything else because, as you know, Nick, you're driving down the road, even with snow tires, and you hit a little bit of slush, especially if you're driving a small car.
Right.
And the next thing you know, you're swerving around, doing a spin if you have. I've done it many times.
Yep.
And there's no controlling it. And if that guy's on the side of the road riding his bike, perfectly innocent, okay, he should, sorry, but I can't control the vehicle, and it's not me driving irresponsibly, okay? It's just so stupid. It is unsafe. It's a hazard. It's accidents waiting to happen. Get off your bike. You don't want to drive. You don't own a car, whatever. Get in public transport. Get in the bus. You don't want to ride the bus. Tough. If you're an environmentalist, you've forced enough of us to spend taxpayers' money on providing public transit, mass transit. Use it.
This can be summed up very easily in one short sentence. Big eats little. Because when you're on a bike, you're little. And I don't care how big the car is, it's always bigger than you are. It weighs more, it goes faster, carries more kinetic energy. And when you're on your bike, and I see it even today, when I go downtown every day in this city. I see people, and they got snow tires for these things now. They look like, balloon
bicycle
tires.
snow tires?
Yeah. They're huge. They're you almost can't get two hands around them. And I'm thinking to myself, buddy, you're out of your freaking mind for all the reasons you've already articulated. It's just the idea. Bicycles were never designed to be a serious mode of transportation for seasons. If you want to ride to work in the summertime or in the spring or even into the fall, and it's possible where you can, get to work and back without putting yourself in mortal danger, knock yourself out. I don't care. But the moment you swing your leg over that saddle and you sit down and there's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 inches of snow on the ground and you expect to get to work on time safely without putting other people's lives at risk, because now they have to account for not only their driving but for yours. They have to drive their car and your bike. Because if that thing goes sideways on you, that bike is as much out of control as the car would be. And he has to react to that in a situation that never should exist. I can't tell you how much I agree with what you just said.
Nick, you and I are agreeing.
It's not often that happens, but
it happens an awful lot. It really does.
And I don't have any problem with bikes, and they're great exercise, all that stuff, but don't take them seriously.
Well, whatever. Just keep them off the roads in the wintertime. That's all I'm saying. Okay? More Christmas music coming up, so sit back, enjoy yourselves, guys, and we will be back in a couple of minutes. We're back in the combat zone. I'm Joe, he's Nick, and you'll have to excuse Nick because he's cutting himself a piece of cheese right now.
I am. I just felt like I needed a little snack and a couple of crackers to go with it, so ran upstairs.
I'm not sure about those crackers when you're trying to talk in the microphone there,
I'm
Nick.
not so sure about the cheese.
Well, the cheese isn't going to be so bad, presumably, but it's a good thing that we have these mic covers,
Yeah, it is.
You don't actually need them with these particular microphones, but then I thought, okay, let's protect them and make them last a little bit longer, especially with Nick eating his crummy crackers.
Well, you got to be careful not to spit it into the microphone.
Yeah, well, there you go. And my mother always said, don't talk with your mouth full, Nick.
It's not full. There's plenty of room.
It's only half full. It's only half full.
Okay.
All right, come on. Let's get on. We're starting to cook with gas here now. Let's move on to something else. What else is going on in the world there, Nick?
Well, let's see.
Nick's checking his.
I'm checking my list.
His storyboard.
Oh yeah, I know what we want to get into.
Come on, let's go.
Do you remember? Let's talk for just a few minutes about the things that we used to be able to do in schools that we can't do anymore.
Right. That's a great topic.
I thought so.
Yeah. That was just a brainstorm. I walking in the door going, hey, let's talk about all those things we used to be able to do. Okay, like fights. Everybody,
What?
Nick has stopped in mid-chew. He's going, no, we're not talking about fighting in the schoolyard. Although, in fairness, I got to tell you, you settled these things as kids. It was fighting was never allowed.
Nope.
But sometimes you defended yourself, and there's nothing like punching a bully in the nose to stop him from being a bully.
There's nothing more satisfying.
Well, I won't go that far, Nick.
Well,
I won't go that far.
I didn't do it. I only did it, I think, once, but it felt good.
I was not a bully.
No, bully.
But people didn't. People tried to push me around from time to time, and I was a really easygoing guy. So I was a target from time to time of these people who would try to pick on people.
Well.
But I didn't put up with it. I never put up with it, Nick. I never did.
I didn't either. I ran away.
Okay, well, running away works too.
In grade 8, I was
But seriously, all of the things that we used to do in schoolyards that you don't do now, okay? First of all, growing up in Canada, okay, what do you do, at least when we were going to school, Nick, during recess and during lunch hour outside? And by the way, it was very rare that classes were canceled because it was too cold, or that sometimes they would keep you in classes where school was never canceled because of too cold, and it was never canceled because it was too hot.
That's true.
But sometimes in the wintertime, it would get so cold where we were that they wouldn't let us go out in the schoolyard during the recess time. Because with the you could get, it doesn't happen often, but, temperatures, before global warming hit, right, Nick?
Right.
Okay, before all that man-made climate change, it wasn't unusual for us to be having temperatures in the wintertime of, minus 30, minus 35.
Yep.
And then you throw the wind chill in. There were days, I remember clearly, where we would be facing a wind chill of, minus 45, minus 50 degrees easily.
Yep.
When it started to get that cold, it made sense not to send us outside for recess. But normally it wasn't that cold. So they wouldn't keep us in under any circumstances. And what would you do? You'd go out, and there were two things in the wintertime, two great pastimes. The first was you'd form these hockey teams, and you'd put like a chunk of snow, two chunks of snow about 6 feet apart for nets.
That's right.
On opposite sides of wherever you were doing this.
Right.
And another piece of ice or whatever would be the puck.
That's right.
Or you could actually have a puck
or a ball,
right? And you played hockey.
That's right.
But not with hockey sticks. We played hockey, just kicking it like it was actually kind of soccer.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was great. Oh yeah, and everybody had their favorite player.
Of course.
And everybody was pretending to be their favorite player, right?
Well, no, we used to bring hockey sticks to school. And we would do that all.
Yeah, you could do that. I don't know for whatever reason we never did that. I don't know why.
Every school was a little bit different, but if if it wasn't that, it was King of the Hill.
Well, that's the second
snowball fights.
The second great activity was King of the Hill.
Oh yeah,
because what they would do is, of course, they would plow the snow.
That's right.
Into a big pile. Okay,
that's right.
Whenever we had a snowfall. And it was all about, you'd get up, whoever was the first person on the top of that hill at recess time, and then everybody would spend the entire recess trying to take him down.
That's right.
And we were, it was terribly rough.
Oh, yeah.
But I got to tell you, nobody was ever really injured when I'm doing this stuff.
You know what? When you're a youngster, and by that I'm talking grade school age, because that's where most of this frivolity took place.
Well, of course, we're talking elementary school.
Yeah, that's
kindergarten to grade 6, 7, maybe 8.
Well, in my case, it was grade 8. But the point is that you were more made of rubber than you were of bone. And you tend to bounce a lot more when you're 8 years old or 10 years old than you do when you're 50. So there was a certain amount, and the teachers were also, a lot of them were parents. And, they didn't see anything wrong with that as long as you didn't start fisticuffs, and they allowed it. They just would keep an eye so that if someone did get hurt or a bloody nose or something,
grabbing somebody by the scruff of the neck,
absolutely,
and tossing them off of that 10-foot hill face first. That was allowed.
Yes, it was.
But if you threw fists, that was the line you couldn't cross.
That's right. You had to do it by actually physically knocking them off, but it couldn't be in a violent way. It couldn't be in a spurt of anger, right? It was all in good fun. And even if you want to go other things that we used to have the 10 Commandments on the wall of the school. Now, there was a state, and I saw it, and I should have highlighted it. There was a state in one, I think it was North Carolina. And they had just passed a law that said it's okay to put the 10 Commandments back on the walls of our schools. Well, first of all, they never should have come down. And secondly, putting them back, they were just part of the background. They were there. And I don't understand why people got upset about them in the first place, because most of the kids would walk by them and never even pay attention to them. But they were part of the school. And I think it was a big mistake to take them down.
Okay. I agree, but it's a separate topic. I just want to go over for a minute more, or two, about the kinds of activities that we used to engage in the schoolyard that kids no longer have. And we talked about winter. And of course, you mentioned snowball fights.
Yep.
And snowball fights, that was kind of a. I can't say that I don't recall that we were entirely allowed to do it. From long distance, that was one thing, but I know the teachers kind of frowned on it because, people would get injured that way, and we were sort of starting to get to the point when I was in school where they were starting to be paying a little bit more attention to
Well, there was
injuries from that kind of thing.
And I think, I don't know that it lasted through my whole tenure in school, because what some of the kids would do is they'd make ice balls. They would pack them down so hard that when you hit somebody, it wasn't just a ball of snow like you'd scoop up off the ground. This thing was a missile. It was like a baseball. And you could really hurt somebody. And I think that was probably the beginning of the end for that. But if you look at some of the other things, like switch over to summertime.
Jungle gyms.
Monkey bars.
I don't think I can see. I don't know if I've seen monkey bars anywhere anymore.
You can't find them because now it's all these new play structures, right? Designed to encourage children to play. Well, what the heck? There was a school in New Zealand, I think it was, about a year ago, who they had some construction going on, and the kids would take the construction materials like the scaffolding and the planks and so on. They build forts out of it. And the principal was confronted by the teachers and said, "We need to put a stop." He says, "No, let them play. This is them being creative." And then at the same school, they had probably the only tree left in New Zealand in a schoolyard. One of the boys that climbed a tree fell out, broke his arm. And the mother came in to see the principal with the little boy, and he's thinking, oh, here we go. I'm going to get it now. And she says, "I do not want you to cut that tree down. He fell. He broke his arm. He will recover. But this is how kids learn how to play." And she supported him. As far as I know, the tree's still there. But what we've done by taking away all these things that allow kids creative play and to try to transplant what we think is safe and what we think, we've robbed them of their creativity.
Creativity, for one, a little bit of toughness.
Yeah, there's that too.
I think that, and we're always encouraging kids to go out and exercise. But then we take away the free exercise, the opportunity for them to just engage in physical play. And roughhousing, it's not such a bad thing. It's not such a bad thing.
No, it's not. I think, it's, again, you get into because the girls didn't have a lot of that. They had other things that they did, but it allowed the kids to be who they were. Like you had boys being boys and girls being girls. And yes, there was
man. Be careful the way you're saying that, Nick. Just be careful.
In grade school, there's a lot of tomboys. Like a lot of the girls, I know in my own case, some of my daughters, when I'm thinking of one specifically, I won't name her in case she ever hears this, but she's bigger and stronger than most of the guys in her class. And she has threatened to scalp one of them with her teeth if he doesn't smarten up and behave properly. And if you knew who I was talking about and knew her at all, you'd realize that's not all that far of a stretch. But a lot of these kids, they came with if you allowed them to vent all this energy in the schoolyard, then they would sit more quietly in classes instead of fidgeting and you didn't get as much. The reason why we didn't have all these drugs to control kids in schools is because you burn it all off outside. They went outside and they'd roughhouse and they'd play soccer, they'd play baseball, they'd play hockey, they'd play whatever, and burn that excess energy off. And it made their teacher's life so much more easy when they got back in the classroom.
Now, you said you touched on a subject that I think is really important. You didn't realize, and I sort of made a joke saying, don't talk that way, don't go there, tongue in cheek about girls and tomboys and stuff like that. But I think that there's an important point or observation to make around that, Nick. When before we were in grade school, there was always this idea of, boys should be boys, girls should be girls.
Right.
Girls wore dresses. Maybe they didn't always wear dresses, but boys never wore dresses.
That's right.
And blue was a boy's color, pink was a girl's color.
Right.
Boys don't play with dolls, girls play with dolls.
Right.
Girls play with dolls. And that would be kind of the social environment that, let's say, our parents grew up with. Mm-hmm. But when we were going to school, all of that was changing. And the idea was, the new idea was, at the time it was a new idea, was that girls and boys were different, but they weren't different based on the kinds of games that they played or the colors that they liked. And so we were taught that just because a guy likes to play with dolls doesn't mean that he's like a girl. And just because a girl wants to climb trees and wants to have short hair and doesn't like wearing dresses and that, I mean, we used to call them tomboys. Right? Doesn't mean that they are secretly a boy or deep down a boy.
Right.
That you couldn't judge, you couldn't put a girl or a boy into a box based on the kinds of games they liked and their preferences, their external preferences, like, you know, do you like flowers? That kind of thing. And this was something that was hammered home with us over and over again, that it doesn't matter. If a guy wants to play with dolls, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. But today, this is where I'm going with this.
Okay.
Today, that whole thing has been flipped upside down, where today it's taken as an indication of the real gender identity of that boy or girl. If a boy plays with dolls, that means that he must secretly or deep down inside, he must be a female trapped in a boy's body.
Right.
And vice versa. If a girl likes to play, you know, tackle football, that's an indication, and it is taken today as an indication that that girl may be a boy trapped in a girl's body. So what we were taught was completely insignificant, and that our parents were totally old-fashioned misogynists for our fathers, and, you know, wallflowers for our mothers and aunts, and that when we were taught that all of their attitudes toward the indication that, or whatever the accoutrements and preferences of kids might indicate with respect to their sexuality, ultimately, we were taught growing up that all of that was dead wrong, old-fashioned, just mythology, and that there was no difference. And now what our kids in the school today are being taught, interestingly enough, is it's actually not new. They're being taught that what we were taught was wrong, and the old-fashioned way about thinking about these things that our parents used to believe in was actually right.
Actually, I saw something on Facebook today how some professor somewhere who why they give these people press time, I have no idea. They should just ignore these people, but said that now it needs to be taught that boys can have periods too. I mean, absolute nonsense. Complete and utter, you know, why they even give these people time, I have no idea. But there is a certain element in our educational system that wants a complete blurring of the line between the genders. Now, you're talking, we're going back just a minute to things we used to do in schoolyards that we don't see anymore. When's the last time you drove by a schoolyard and saw a bunch of girls playing jump rope? I mean, they would do the double Dutch thing, and I could never. I know some of the guys would do it too, but the girls were the real masters of it. That, and you know how they would sit there and make these little rhymes, and they would clap and pat their hands back and forth. I never see that anymore. I never see them. I never hear about it. It used to be, some of these kids got so good at it that they would just, you know, there was a little bit of a kind of rhyme or a chant they would go through, and slapping their hands and slapping. You never see that anymore. And that's, in its own way, is kind of a way of creativity, because they came up with these things on their own. There's none of this stuff written down. They just did it because it was fun. They enjoyed it and found new ways to do it. Same thing with jump rope. Like, if you watch the girls go out, they would step in doing double Dutch where they have two ropes going, and they would just unbelievable. And it was, I think back on it now, and I'd end up tangled up in a rope. I didn't have the sense of rhythm for it. But anyway, those are some of the things that we used to do in grade school that have long since passed, are considered archaic, and you know, or you just can't do it anymore. In high school, when I was in The Sound of Music, they actually gave me a toy gun. I played the part of what's his name, the young kid that turns him in the movie. Come on,
Kurt.
What's that?
Kurt? No, it wasn't Kurt.
No,
Kurt, Carl.
Liesel's boyfriend.
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about.
Anyway, that's the role I played, and they dressed me up in this kind of weird-looking thing, supposed to be a uniform, but they gave me a sidearm. Now, it was just a toy, but can you imagine them doing that today?
Well, my son got suspended from grade 1, I think it was.
Ralph Gruber. That was his name.
Rolf. You're right. It was Rolf. I didn't know it was Rolf Gruber, but it was Rolf.
That's his name.
My son got suspended for a day from grade 1 or grade 2 for taking a pair of scissors and pretending it was a toy gun and pointing at people going,
bang, bang, bang.
Bang, 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 right? Or whatever it was. And yeah, they suspended him.
Unbelievable.
I know.
All right. I think it's time we should change gears here and get into something a little more meaty. The Liberals have floated an idea that was tried here in Ontario, and Doug Ford put the knife into, and that is this basic income. They're saying that what they want to do is to bring back this idea about eventually guaranteeing. There's a whole bunch of steps they want to go through. They're not there yet, and it's like a typical Liberal lie. You know, they try to put the bad news off later, and don't worry about it. Everything's going to be fine. We'll find a way to finance this. And I was having this conversation with my son earlier before the show and talking about this, and he said, so how much are my taxes going to go up to pay for this? I said, well, you're quite right. Taxes will go up because they're not going to, if it's this particular government, they're not going to be able to cut the programs necessary to fund this thing. They're not going to put an end to CCP. They're not going to put an end to ODSP or, you know, whatever the federal version of that is. They're not going to do those kinds of things. So you're not going to see any major, because the way they're selling it is say, well, we're just going to get rid of all these other programs and just use this one. That's the way they sell it. But they're not going to do that. When's the last time anybody can say that they saw the government actually eliminate a program to fund another one with?
Okay, so you're going to hate me, Nick.
Am I?
Yeah, you're going to hate me because, first of all, it's not so much that you cancel the other programs with a guaranteed minimum income. And first of all, in principle, I'm uncomfortable with guaranteed minimum income.
So am I.
Okay, but I want to emphasize that in terms of how much it would cost to implement a program like this, you don't actually have to eliminate other programs, but if you have a guaranteed minimum income, the people who are getting the guaranteed minimum income actually wouldn't qualify for any of the other programs because they have a minimum income that would exceed what they would be getting from any of the other programs. So it's not as black and white as you're making it out. There would be real savings. And here's the thing about guaranteed minimum income. And again, I stress that I'm not entirely comfortable with the idea. But from a purely dollars and cents point of view, it's probably cheaper or not much more expensive to do guaranteed minimum income. And for those of our listeners out there who are saying, oh, how could you possibly think of such a program? It's, you know, it takes away incentive, does all that thing. My response to that, and this is not an original response. This is something that a friend of mine pointed out to me, who's he's an arch conservative, okay? And when we were talking about this and I was going, oh, guaranteed minimum income, are you crazy? Why do you want to do that? And he pointed out to me, he said, you know, we actually already have guaranteed minimum income because we have all kinds of a hodgepodge of different programs to ensure that people have housing, that they have minimum wage, that they have rent, that they have welfare, that they have income supplement. There's probably 24 programs out there that, in the aggregate, are a guaranteed minimum program in some. And so what I'm saying is, again, making the point that in principle, I'm not entirely comfortable with it. As a practical matter, it's really not as big a leap as people seem to think it is.
Okay, I hear you, and I don't necessarily say that I'm going to disagree with you in principle. If everything goes correctly, then fine. Maybe there is a way to save some money here. But the bottom line is, look at who wants to do it. Yeah, I have no faith in. You know what? I don't have any faith in any stripe of politician being able to pull this off without making a dog's breakfast of it. It's one of the reasons why conservatives like me think government should be smaller, not bigger. People should take on more responsibility, not less, and that these welfare programs should only go to those who absolutely cannot get out and do things for themselves. I'm not heartless. I'm not saying that everybody should die in the street if they can't hold a job. You know, there's all kinds of reasons why people end up homeless. There's all kinds of reasons why people end up alcoholics or drug addicts, and I'm not unsympathetic to that. But if you give people a guaranteed income and say you're going to make, no matter what, you're going to make $30,000 a year. I'm just picking a number out of the blue. I don't know what the real number would be. What's different? What's the difference between that and communist Russia?
Oh, there's a huge difference. People never got that kind of a benefit in the communist countries.
It's the principle.
It's funny. Well, it's funny because in socialist countries could never maintain the kind of socialism that you get in a capitalist country.
But how do you grow a capitalist economy if you've got that kind of a program?
Well, yeah, that of course is seriously, setting aside all the joking, Nick. That of course is the issue. That's the concern. How do you ensure that you continue to have the incentive for people to go out and work if they don't have to go out and work?
Right.
But my answer to that is that, to a degree, you already have that problem now with our welfare system. So I hear you. That would be my chief concern, is that you're taking away incentive, and without incentive, okay, are people going to go out there and work, or are they just going to stay at home and take their guaranteed minimum income? So that's why it has to be low enough that people are actually going to go out and work, but high enough that it's actually replacing the programs that exist today.
Let's say you set the bar at 24,000, which is basically below the poverty line as far as I understand it. Then they'll come along and they'll say, "Oh, well, it's not enough," and somebody will introduce a program for a guaranteed basic income supplement, and more money will get poured into this because it attracts voters. It looks good. You look compassionate. For all the wrong reasons. And that's why I don't think this is a very good idea. This is a disaster waiting for a place to happen, no matter how good the intentions are. And that's why, as far as I'm concerned, there's an attitude. Now, I'm not going to say this in sweeping broad terms, but hunger is a powerful motivator. And if somebody is capable, now there's a difference. The caveat is they have to be physically capable of going out and getting a job, then I do not feel like funding his lazy lifestyle. Because what you're doing when you're on welfare or on a guaranteed supplement, what you're doing is running up and down the street, knocking on your neighbor's door, and demanding they provide you an income because you're too damn lazy to go out and get one yourself.
Okay.
Had to end it there because we're at the bottom of that.
All right. Well, let's put on a little bit more Christmas music. We will be back with you guys in a couple of minutes. Okay, we're back in the combat zone. I'm Joe, he's Nick, and I'm taking Nick's spot here in terms of doing the reintroduction because Nick can't seem to get it straight. I am Joe, he is Nick, rather than he's Joe and I'm Nick.
I just throw a curveball at you once in a while, that's all.
Every now, are you doing it on purpose, Nick?
I'll say yes.
Okay. Listen, just a quick note. We were hoping, here I am chewing on cheese. Sorry about that, guys. This is bad radio etiquette. No, seriously, I think let's put off Brexit. We're going to put off Brexit until we're back Maybe we'll
the
get
new
somebody
year.
to talk about it.
We're not going to have time to do it justice. There is a topic I did promise to do last week, and I think it's an important one. Because how many times are we told that electric cars are the future? Or, how many times do we pick up our cell phone and never think, what are you laughing at?
Okay, Nick, we've got to stop eating while we're on air.
I'm not eating, I'm chewing. Anyway, there's this whole green movement built around new technology, solar panels, wind turbines, electric cars, alternative energy. Well, this stuff does not come without cost. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is about as undemocratic as it gets, there's a way to tell which countries are democratic and which ones aren't. If
they say democratic, they're
not
definitely
democratic.
aren't.
Right. Like you don't say the Democratic Dominion of Canada. You don't say the Democratic United States of America. You don't say the Democratic Kingdom of England, right? Or of the United Kingdom. You don't say those things. It's in people.
The United Democratic Kingdom.
That's right. But the People's Democratic Republic of North Korea, okay, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, okay, these places
it used to be the
hellholes.
German Democratic Republic.
Yeah, there's another example. Okay, anyway, so in this wonderful place that has an average GDP per capita of about $789 a year. This tells you where they fall in the world economic scale. This place is it's a hellhole.
Right, but I know places where the per capita income is less than that, but believe it or not. Anyway, let's go on.
How do you get lower than that?
It's people. I don't want to get into this discussion.
Okay.
Except to say this, Nick. When people used to talk about Occupy Wall Street and the 1%,
yeah,
I used to remind them that every single person in this country, including the poorest of the poor, are part of the 1% globally.
All right. Yeah, that is very true. And it's funny how they don't like admitting that fact because it shoots holes in their whole protest. Anyway, let me share with you a little bit from this story. This is from the Daily Mail. And it's from last week, and I meant to get to it because I think it's important. I think that people need, and it's not the only source. This is just this story was all over the news, at least online. I noticed the mainstream media here in North America didn't pick it up, but it's not just the Daily Mail. You'll find it all over the place if you Google it. Anyway, the headline is, child minors aged 4 living in a hell on earth so you can drive an electric car. Okay, now, as I said, these new technologies come with a heck of a price. When you're talking about building an electric car, each battery requires about 15 pounds of cobalt. Okay, your cell phone requires a few grams of it. But the problem is that when they mine this stuff, they're using ancient mining techniques. I'm talking about going back to the Romans days where people just went into the ground with picks and break the rocks up. And then these kids, 4, 6, 8 years old, would carry up chunks of rock. And if they're not fast enough, they get beaten for it. There's all kinds of health concerns around it. And they make a total, whatever, 8 pence a day is converted to Canadian. I don't know what that is.
Not much.
I think that's the bottom line. It's not much. And they do it because it's their only source of income, and they have to eat.
Right. The term penny was slang for pence.
Okay, so you're talking, let's round it off to say it's 10 cents a day.
About that, maybe.
Okay.
Whatever the exchange rate is.
It's certainly slave labor wages.
Right.
Okay, so these kids, let me tell you about one of them. His name is Dorson, and he's one of an army of children, some just 4 years old, working in the vast polluted mines of the Democratic Republic of Congo, where toxic red dust burns their eyes and they run the risk of skin disease and a deadly lung condition. Here, for a wage of just 10 cents a day, the children are made to check the rocks for the telltale chocolate-brown streaks of cobalt, the prized ingredient essential for the batteries that power electric cars. And it's feared that thousands more children could be about to be dragged into this hellish daily existence after the historic pledge made by Britain to ban the sale of petrol and diesel cars from 2040 onwards and to switch to electric vehicles. Now, right now, the last figure I saw is electric cars make up somewhere about 1.5, maybe 2% of the total cars on the road here in North America. If England, which has 80, 90 million people in it, it's somewhere between 60 and 80. I'd have to look it up. But
right, but it's in that range.
It's in that range. Okay, so, which is twice what Canada has.
That's right. It's about twice the population of Canada.
Right, in an area much smaller. If they take their vehicles off the road, gasoline-powered or petrol-powered, I'm not sure what the difference between the two fuels is.
There's no difference. Gasoline is called petrol over there.
Okay. So if they pull their gas-powered vehicles off and diesel-powered and replace them with, think about this. If a car requires 33 pounds of electricity, I was wrong. I thought it was 15. It's 33 pounds of cobalt per car. How many millions of cars are they going to have put on the road just in England? What is that going to do to people in the Congo?
Or anywhere else where they're mining this stuff? No, you're making a very good point, Nick, and that is, the law of unintended consequences. Although, in this case, people should know better. The environmental and human disaster that it's attached to the banning of carbon fuel powered cars is quite serious. It's virtually profound, if there's such a term as virtually profound. But people don't really think about that. They're only thinking about the cars burning gasoline, and of course they're worried about the pollutants and the emissions that come from that. And when I say pollutants, I'm not talking about water vapor, and I'm not talking about CO2. Neither of those are pollutants, although the water vapor is a greenhouse gas as well. It's funny how nobody's talking about eliminating, boiling your kettle, okay, or putting a pot of boiling water on for pasta. No, but this is it's the hypocrisy of it, okay? I mean, a significant source of CO2 in a modern country like Canada is Perrier.
Oh. Yeah.
Well, maybe not Perrier, but sodas, okay? And I don't know. When I say significant, I don't really know what the margin is. But let's face facts, okay? Do we really need Perrier? Do we really need San Pellegrino, which is another bottled soda water, highfalutin, high class? You walk in, you go to Starbucks, right? I need my soda water, right? So what do I get? I get a bottle of Perrier, or get a small bottle of San Pellegrino. And it's very fine. But this stuff is the gas... And this stuff is carbon dioxide,
right? And you never hear anybody talking about banning.
When I crack open a can of Coca-Cola or Pepsi or whatever, okay, or a bottle, the gas that's escaping is carbon dioxide. So we're taking carbon dioxide, we're putting into this stuff, and then we're releasing it into the atmosphere. I don't have a problem with that. I'm just saying that people, you're going to ban the straws. If I walk into a place and I order a cola now, or even a glass of water, I have to specifically ask for a straw if I want a straw. So I ask for a straw. They bring me a Pepsi, okay, with my straw in it. So I'm saving the turtles, not because here I am in Ottawa. There are no turtles. The straws I throw out don't end up anywhere but in landfill, okay? But nobody really thinks about the fact that while they're saving the turtles, they're still killing the planet, allegedly, because of the carbon dioxide that they're releasing into the atmosphere by serving me that Coke or Pepsi or whatever the soda drink is.
Well,
it's all bunk. It's all bunk.
Of course it is. And that's
but I'm not interested in whether it's bunk. I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy of the environmentalists who don't know it.
This is part of the reason. This isn't the only reason I object to electric cars, but this is another reason, is because of the cost to... Well, I didn't know about this until I read this story, so I can't say that it was because of the cobalt mining. But I knew that you have open earth mines in China that make the Athabasca tar sands or oil sands look like a speck on the earth. Right?
Sure.
They just rip the roof off and just dig it out until it's all gone and leave this massive hole behind. There are communities in China where the mining has been so heavy, whole towns have disappeared into the ground. Or at least they've suffered huge structural damage because the shifting earth underneath the town, they've excavated so much soil and so much rock underneath, it's not stable anymore. So we have now, let me just share with you just a little bit more about what the life conditions are like. Adult miners dig up to 600 feet below the surface using basic tools without protective clothing or modern machinery. Sometimes the children are sent down into the narrow makeshift chambers where there is a constant danger of collapse. Cobalt is such a health hazard that it has a respiratory disease named after it, cobalt lung, a form of pneumonia which causes coughing and leads to permanent incapacity and even death. Even simply eating vegetables grown in local soil can cause vomiting and diarrhea, thyroid damage, and fatal lung diseases, while birds and fish cannot survive in the area. I mean, this stuff, it's nuclear waste. And yet there's no concern. Nobody ever thinks about when they get in their Prius or their Tesla, what kind of damage are they being? We're all worried about cars. But our modern internal combustion engines are built in some of the most environmentally friendly plants in the world. The mining practices that Canada engages in are some of the most environmentally friendly mining practices in the world. Because we've had 100 years to sort this stuff out and figure it out and make sure that we know how to do it right. And yet, nobody ever thinks about when you pick up your cell phone or when you put that key or however you start an electric car. I don't know. Maybe you have to pedal it to get it going. I don't know. But the bottom line is there's a tremendous price to be paid. And I think people need to know that when you're considering, because we're always told, pay attention to the kind of purchases you make. Think about the impact on the earth. Well, guess what? Here's a classic example of a really good idea, a good time to do that. Because when you do, maybe you won't buy that electric car because the kids in the Congo are paying for it with their lives. All right. What else? There was one other story we wanted to get to. There's been a recent Supreme Court ruling on this as of December 12th. Okay, so that's about a week, 10 days ago or so. Anyway, according to the story, the way it's headlined, I didn't realize it, but it's not right. The headline is misleading. The headline says Canada's Supreme Court rules that LGBT rights come before your religious beliefs. Okay, now in the fine print, if I can just blow this up again because I can't see it. There we go. Okay. Here's what actually matters out of the story. Friday's ruling against Trinity Western University in BC was closely watched by both religious freedom and gay rights advocates. The university made students promise not to have extramarital or gay sex. Okay, so being the curious man that I am, I said, okay, I don't remember that. I remember a code of conduct. And in it, students were told you can't engage in sexual activity.
Well, you have the code of conduct.
Right here.
So why don't you read the relevant clause?
Okay, so it's
verbatim.
Section 5 under the prohibited conduct part of this agreement, okay? Section 5 says this: sexual impropriety. As a matter of respect and consideration for TWU's Christian beliefs and values, students are expected to refrain from immodest public displays of affection and from sexual intimacy outside of marriage on the campus. Section 6 says, and I'll just throw that in there, they're not allowed to use, view, display, or possess materials that are degrading, dehumanizing, intentionally demeaning, exploitive, hateful, or gratuitously violent, including but not limited to pornography. Now, I want you to think about this.
You'll notice that there is nothing in there about gay sex.
No, they said any sex. It didn't matter, gay or straight. It didn't matter.
It's sex outside of marriage.
That's right.
And sex outside of marriage on the campus.
That's right. So if you had, let's say that you were living on campus and you had, I don't know how their campus is arranged. I can't see this happening in a dorm room, but maybe you had a little apartment or something on the campus in student housing, and you were, both husband and wife were attending the school. Okay, well, they're not going to say you guys can't have sex, but everybody else, if you're not married, then you can't have it. We just don't do it while you're here. They didn't segregate anybody out.
Right.
They just said it's a blanket statement. We don't care.
It's not even against the rules per se. It's something that people agree to,
right,
as a part of joining and going to school at Trinity Western, and it's a very serious problem, Nick. This is and the consequence of this. I don't know if you've mentioned this, but the bottom line is that that jurisdictions, law jurisdictions across the country, have banned graduates of Trinity Western Law School which, by the way, is, in my judgment, one of the better law schools in this country. It's relatively new, but I think it's one of the better law schools in the country. And what they've done is they've banned graduates of this law school from practicing law. In other words, you can't get a license to practice law because the law societies in these different jurisdictions are saying we're not going to give you, we're not going to accredit Trinity Western University Law School.
We're not going to let you approach the bar.
So no law student, no graduate law student from Trinity Western can enter the bar because Trinity Law School is not considered a proper law school by the jurisdictions.
Now, what's crazy about this is when you read this document, this is a wonderful document. This should be in every university across the country because it's specifically non-discriminatory. It doesn't care. There's nothing in it that segregates anybody out and says you can have sex but you can't. It just says that we had, as an institution, have certain core values, and we expect you while you're here to respect them. The same as you would do is if you walked into somebody's home and they said, look, we have certain beliefs and values, and we expect you to respect them while you're here as our guest. That's not unreasonable. Okay, like when I go to your place, there's certain things, you have a certain lifestyle, and I respect that. If you come to my place, it's the same thing. And that's just common courtesy. So this is obviously, to me, just an excuse to go after a Christian-based university for anything that they could find. And they had to dig through this to find that one sentence. And that was what caused them to be able to shut down effectively anybody approaching the bar or being called to the bar, I think in BC, and I don't know about Ontario, but I know for sure it's BC.
Ontario as well. And there are other jurisdictions. But the problem, obviously I have a problem in principle with this whole thing. But I think there's a legal problem around here as well. And I remember, Nick, when you were on terrestrial radio, I was a guest on your show once. We were talking about the euthanasia case in Canada. And in 2015, how the Supreme Court ruled that Canada's laws prohibiting euthanasia or mercy killing were unconstitutional. And at that time, when we talked about it, I pointed out that this was precisely the same case that had come before the Supreme Court in 92 with Rodriguez.
Right.
It was precisely the same complaint, and it was precisely the same case. And at that time, the court ruled that this law was constitutional. And when they made their decision, they cited that there was a change in public opinion, and that justified changing the ruling. And my response to that at the time was that, first of all, the court should never have agreed to hear the case this time around because it had already been adjudicated, and there was no material change in circumstance, meaning the law didn't change, the complaint didn't change, the complainant or the plaintiff changed. Obviously, the individual who's bringing the case changed, but the circumstances around the case was brought. It was the same.
Change.
The Constitution didn't change. The law didn't change. This was a case where precedent had been set. The Supreme Court had already spoken on this, and the court should never have heard the case. But they did, and they changed the law, and their reason for changing the law was because, quote-unquote, public opinion had changed on this, public attitudes had changed about it. And without saying whether that's true or not, let's assume for the sake of argument it's true. I'm prepared to say, right, fine, change the law then, but the proper place for that is not in the courts. The proper place for that is the legislative branch, because that's where you debate these things based on public attitudes. Okay. Now, what does this have to do with this Trinity Western case? Well, I don't recall the exact year, but it would have been the year around the turn of the century. So 2001, 2002, thereabouts. It might have been a couple of years later. It might have been 2002 or 2003 or 4. But there was a case brought that the Supreme Court ruled on with respect to Trinity Western, and it had to do particularly with the BC College of Teachers refusing to accept the teaching credentials of graduates of the education program at Trinity Western University. And that case made its way all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Trinity Western University in that case. And their argument was you can make a complaint of discrimination, but you have to have evidence of discrimination before you can say that we have to ban these people because of discriminatory practices. So it was kind of like not really a great ruling. It left the door open to people still making the same complaint. But the court was quite explicit in saying you can't make this complaint. You can't allege that Trinity Western graduates, because of the code of conduct, that was the same basis for their complaint at the time, are going to bring their prejudices, if there's such a thing as prejudices in this area, into the classroom. You can't, before they do it, make the complaint and say they're going to do it. You have to bring evidence that they're doing it,
right,
and then we'll consider it.
It's called being innocent until proven guilty.
Okay, except I wouldn't even go that far, because I would say being prejudiced should not be a crime.
Yeah, fair enough.
You shouldn't be. Obviously, I don't think you should be prejudiced in certain areas, but is that really sufficient to call it a crime? Anyway, Nick, the problem is that the precise reason why, exactly the same reason that the court ruled on in the early 2000s, was the basis for this complaint with respect to the law school graduates. So the question I have is, why did the courts even take this case on? The court already adjudicated this. And this is a very real problem that we have in our law system. Well, it's all arbitrary.
We have an activist Supreme Court.
Well, but it's not just that it's activist; it's arbitrary.
Well, yes,
if you want to have an activist court, but they're ruling consistently. Okay, I don't agree with their rulings, but there's a consistency to it. There has to be some predictability to the law. Otherwise, how do you know from one day to the next whether you're breaking the law?
Well, that's true, but I think the reason why it's arbitrary is because it is an activist. They have a certain agenda they want to push forward, and they'll take cases that support that agenda and adjudicate accordingly, and they will turn a deaf ear to other cases that do not support their agenda, or they'll adjudicate accordingly. So it's the idea of having Supreme Court judges. First of all, the idea of the Supreme Court being supreme, most people have it in their head. That means they're the highest authority in the land. That's not what the term Supreme Court means. It means it's the highest court in the land, but the highest authority is the legislative body. And we have to understand that the legislative body can take a Supreme Court decision and say, okay, we don't like the way this went, so we're going to write a new law, and we're going to come at it again from a different angle and make sure we get the result we want, because they're not the ones that tell the Canadian people. All they're supposed to do is look at a law and say, is it constitutional, yes or no?
And in a case like this, you can actually, well, it's different in this case because the court wasn't ruling that a law was unconstitutional. So, but in the case of the Supreme Court rules that a law is constitutional, the legislative branch can invoke the notwithstanding clause, Section 33 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, to uphold the law, notwithstanding, that's where the notwithstanding clause term comes from, to uphold the law, notwithstanding the fact that the Supreme Court said it was unconstitutional. Doesn't really apply in this case because we're not talking about a law, but I hear you loud and clear. It's a very serious problem.
We have to wrap it up, Joseph. We're out of time.
We're getting out of time, but we can't let the occasion pass. First of all, Nick, without reminding our listeners that next week we're going to take a break because it's Boxing Day, the day after Christmas. But Nick, I want to say it's been great the last 40. This is our 40th episode.
Yep.
I really enjoyed doing this with you. And I want to say to you, Nick, and your family, have a great Christmas. Okay. Yes, you heard me, people out there, Christmas. And I want to say that to our listeners, too, regardless of, whether you're Jewish or Christian or whatever, or another religion. And I'm Jewish. I don't practice Christmas, but this is a Christmas season, and that has meaning, cultural meaning for all of us. And so I want to wish all of our listeners also a very happy and joyous and meaningful Christmas as well.
Well, thank you, Joseph. I certainly wish the same for you and yours. For what I know you're not Christian, but enjoy the holiday season. And I have had a blast doing this with you. It's been a lot of fun. I look forward to next year, and I know that in the next, in the coming year, the show will get bigger and better. And we've got some ideas we're working on to help promote the show and to attract more people so that we can help spread the gospel of Joseph and Nick.
Okay, the gospel of Joseph and Nick. I don't know about that one. Okay, Merry Christmas, guys. Happy New Year. We'll catch you in the new year. January 2nd.
January 2nd. Yeah.
All right. All right. Take care.